Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about LTCN BCHG HZEN and ETCG. I'm also going to go over our personal portfolio of grayscale trusts with you guys. And at the end of this video, we'll talk about the FOMC and what's going on with that and how the markets reacted. So with that being said, let's get it. So first thing we're going to start with here is our portfolio. As you guys can see, we are up pretty substantially on the day. This is the day's gains. As you can see, we're up 5.6% on BCHG, 6.8%, almost 7% on LTCN, just a little bit on HZEN, not much, and a pretty decent amount, 7% on ETCG, but of course, we're still down on that one. So it kind of is what it is. Can't be right all the time, right? We would rather that it actually dip, at least in the immediate short term, so we can buy more of it. But so as you guys can see, we're up pretty substantially, so about 80% in total. We could take profits right now, but we're not going to because we think the biggest moves in crypto are yet to come. Not entirely sure if it's going to start happening soon, like in the next few months, or if it's going to begin at the end of the year like it usually does. We'll just have to wait and see on that one. So that's what's going on with the portfolio now. We've added a few shares to ETCG, nothing substantial. It's possible that Bitcoin and crypto may still pull back even more from where it is right now, but that is a subject for another video. So this is where we stand right now on our positions. Excuse me. So let's start with LTCN here. As you guys can see, we are still in the resistance zone. The resistance zone is between $23 and $27. Support is between 13 and 15. We do not have a green candle close above this candle yet, so this resistance zone as of right now is still holding. I would say that there is probably an equal chance that this thing could bust out of this resistance and turn this into support, or it could pull back into this previous support. Either one of those is absolutely possible. Do note that the EMAs are pretty much right around where the support zone is now, so if it pulled back into the support, it would be a perfect bounce, so to speak, on a technical level. So let's just assume you got it in down here at this support zone. You wanted to ride it up. You'd be looking at immediately about a 70 to 97% gain. So big gain there. I want to point out that the next overall resistance area is way up here. So it's kind of hard to see, but you guys can see kind of like these candle bodies here, massive candle bodies. You got your wick here, and then of course we kind of tested it back here and back here. So that resistance is roughly about $100 to $135. So if this thing does pop out of the current resistance and move up, it's going to move up pretty huge. I mean, you're talking like a 4 to a 5.5, almost 6x. From the current price. If it were to pull back into this support zone, it's even more than that. It could be as much as a 10x. Our current share cost basis is actually pretty much right around this support zone. So if you take a look at our cost basis here, 1323, you can see that that's pretty much almost exactly where the bottom of that support is. That did not happen by chance, just so you all know. But anyways, you'd be taking a look at a massive, anywhere from a 5.5x to potentially like a 10x gain pretty quickly if it busts out of there. So now we're going to go to BCHG. Resistance is still holding. So current support is going to be between $7 to $7.50. Resistance is $10 to about $12.75. So if this thing does pull back into support from where it's at right now, you're looking at roughly about a 26% drop. Let's actually go back to LTCN and measure this one as well. This would be a much bigger drop, obviously. So you could be looking at as much as maybe 38 to about 45%. So pretty big move. But do keep in mind the EMAs, every weekly candle close that we get, the EMAs will move up along with the price. So that would kind of close the gap of the drawdown between the current price and whatever the EMAs are at the time. So support here on BCHG, 680 to 750, resistance between $10 to $12.60. So the potential upside move, if you got it into the zone, would be roughly about 41 to 76%. If you wanted to pick it up now and just DCA on the way down, that's entirely up to you. You'd be looking at roughly about 7 to 34%. So not a bad starting point. LTCN, I wouldn't be picking it up here. I'd wait for a pullback if it was going to come. If it doesn't, well, you could maybe get in at the EMAs. That's a possibility. You could start if you wanted to at like 18 something. You'd still get about 26 to about 45% if it moves back into that resistance. So HZEN, this one looks like it might be wanting to hold this level as support here. It's too early to say yet. Notice that the bottom support below that one is in between the EMAs, so that's strong support. So you're looking at 385, 415, 690, and about $8 as your support zones. So two scenarios here. It bounces from this zone and heads into the next resistance, which would be at roughly about 1135 to 1230. If you bought in here, held to the upside here, you'd be looking at 63% or as much as 75%. If it pulls back into the EMAs, we'll do the measure on that real quick. So you could be looking at a pretty large drop, about 42%. But if you decided to wait and said, nah, screw that, I'm going to get in at the lower support, you'd be looking at anywhere from 72 to 100%, and then as much as 184 to 209%. So how you want to go about that, entirely up to you. So ETCG, I would say this one's a little bit closer to the particular buy zone. As you guys can see here, this is all kind of lining up perfectly, actually. So you have this channel here, which sits right around both the EMAs and the current support zone. So that also serves as support, and you have the EMAs sitting around that channel and around the support zone. So I would say that this area is very likely to hold, and the area is pretty much anywhere from 1075 to 1580. Resistance above that 1760 to about $20. So we'll just assume that you wanted to get in now, and it bounced. You'd be looking at 26 to about 44%. But if you think it's going to come back down lower, you say, well, I'll get it when it comes back in the channel. So we'll just say you get it somewhere in the channel, and then you want to hold all the way up. So you'd be looking at about 50 to 71%. And keep in mind, you don't have to wait until it comes back to this channel. You could just DCA down. That's kind of what we're doing currently with ETCG. But again, it's up to you. So GXLM, this one is bouncing, looking very bullish, but we still need to get a confirmation close above this zone. So support currently between $27.50 to $41. Resistance is $52.60 to about just shy of $59. So we'll assume you get it, halfway between the EMAs, roughly about a 58 to 76% gain. So pretty good move. ETH, this one is still not, we have this wick, but it's still not confirming a bullish close out of the current resistance zone. I would say that this is actually, well, you know what? I would say this is still support because we haven't had a bearish close below the zone, but we haven't had a bullish close above it. So I think ETH is still trying to figure out what it wants to do. I would say support's going to be anywhere from 1740 to probably maybe the bottom of the zone, so 2565. The next zone up would be roughly about 4060 to about $47. So if you got in now, assuming it went up, you get about 53 to about 80%. And if it drops back down to this zone, you could be looking at about a 35% drop. But also on the flip side, if you got in somewhere around this zone, to hit the first target would be about 40 to 58%. And then the second target would be a massive 123% and about 176% respectively. So pretty big move. Very indecisive here on Zcash. Doesn't know what it wants to do yet, so probably give it a little bit more time to play out. I would say support is still $4.40 to about $5. Resistance $7.40 to about $8.10. So if you decided to wait to get back in at support, which is possible, assuming that Bitcoin and crypto has a bigger retracement, which could happen, Be about 58 to 74-ish% on that move. GSOL, this thing does actually look like it wants to pull back some more. So I would say support's going to be roughly anywhere between, if we're being conservative here, about 180 to 229. If we're not being conservative, you just want to get in around these wicks, maybe as high as 335. I would not buy there, but that's just me. So if you waited to get into the zone and you got in all the way at the top, you'd be looking at about 195% gain on that one. Mana. So this one is very similar to GSOL. I kind of expect this is going to pull back. Just to give you guys an idea of what that pullback on GSOL could be like if this thing wants to load. So there we go. So the pullback could be pretty nasty, potentially a 50% pullback. And from the current level on mana to the zone, also roughly about a 50% pullback. So it's up to you how you want to play this, but support is between $17.60 to $20. And I would say that there's no clear resistance yet. So the peak's going to be about 70. If you wanted to wait to get in at the zone, assuming it does pull back, you'd be looking at nearly a 300% gain. So big move there. GBAT, not as bearish on this one. I would say it looks a little bit more bullish, although this big red candle is not very convincing. The reason it looks bullish is because there's a wick bouncing off the EMAs here, but I would still argue that the top of these candles is probably where this thing is going to drop to if it does. Main reason being is because that would turn into support, and the EMAs are also right around there. So roughly about a 53% drop if it does come down. If you wanted to wait to get in between these EMAs somewhere, so I'd say roughly about 560 to 913, and then it smashes back to the upside, you'd be looking at a huge, nearly 360% gain on that one. So G-Link, this one's a little bit closer to the buy area, so you can see the zone here, plus the EMAs are lining up, plus the price is getting pretty close to that area. So this one's not as overextended, as much as a 40% pullback to get to the bottom of the zone, so about 10% less than the others. So the zone is currently between $68 to about $84, and the top here, as you guys can see, is up at $222. So if we were to measure that, assuming you got in here at the zone, if you have the patience to do so, I can understand some people not having the patience. We're in this to make money, right? So 206% on that move. PhilG, this one has had a pretty large drop. It's too early to say if this is going to come down or not. We have 2 more trading days, and keep in mind when those days are over, the EMAs will move up again. So I suspect price might kind of base out somewhere between 111 to about 175. The top is roughly about $395. So assuming you wanted to get in between the EMAs and ride it to the top, you'd be looking at about 200%. GLIV, this one is much, much closer to what I would consider to be a perfect entry. Of course, there is no such thing as a perfect entry, but basically where the probability of profit is stacked highest in the favor of the trader is what I mean to say. So I could see it probably bouncing somewhere between 21 to about, I'd say $26, somewhere in there. So we're pretty close to that level. If it pulls back to this EMA and then bounces from that point, that'd only be roughly about a 22% drop, which again, in crypto is really nothing. Compared to the massive drop we saw from the top, it was nearly 72%. So some of that risk has been taken off the table. Now it's a little bit less risky to get into this from a long perspective. So if you wanted to get in now, which is entirely up to you, you'd be looking at about 178% gain. If you wanted to wait to get into the top of these candles around this EMA down here, you'd be looking at nearly 260%. So that's it for the Grayscale Trust. Now let's talk about the FOMC. So you guys can go watch the FOMC meeting live for yourself. We'll actually leave a link in this video that you guys can go click on and see it for yourself if that's something you're interested in. But basically, the gist of what Powell said is that they're just simply going to hold rates for now. They're going to wait to start cutting them because they feel like inflation hasn't really come down enough yet. They're not entirely sure that it is sustainably going down to 2%. So as a result of that, they're holding off on the rate cuts. They're still, I believe they're still projected to do 3 rate cuts this year. So probably somewhere around the end of Q3, start of Q4. We thought that they were going to cut by now, but again, the inflation reading is not, it's not moving down as quickly as they would like. So that unfortunately is what's going on right now, but markets soaked it up and they were loving it. They didn't care because markets really went up today. If you guys were looking at your portfolios and you were in the right positions, you saw massive, massive increases on your positions. So the inflation basically on the last CPI bumped up 0.1%. I would say that's not a big deal. I'm not really too concerned about that. If it had gone up to like 3.5 or 4% or something like that, then I would say yikes. The Fed definitely needs to raise rates again, or definitely not even talk about cutting this year, but that didn't happen. It was only a 0.1% increase, so that's essentially nothing, and that was offset by core inflation. So basically, inflation did nothing last month. My bigger concern here is the rise in unemployment. That is a little bit more concerning, but we'll talk about that in the next macro video. So the last thing I want to point out here is, as you guys can see, the minor stocks have absolutely ripped. One thing I did want to tell you guys is we have 200 shares of Riot. We bought at less than $12 and wrote some options on that, but we'll get into that later. And as you guys can see, yeah, all of these just absolutely moonshot. Coinbase moonshot, which means that MSTY and Coney moonshot. So MSTR, massive increase again, 9%. And if we go down to the grayscale trusts in general, just take a quick peek at that. You guys can see that pretty much almost all of them, except the ones that were overextended, had massive increases on the day. And native crypto especially had huge increases. So let's kind of take a bird's eye look at this. You guys can see that a lot of these are double-digit gainers, especially Ethereum. Bitcoin's up almost 10%. So clearly the markets absolutely loved what Jay Powell had to say today at the FOMC meeting. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see y'all later. Peace.